Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be going over a really fun illustration I did of this mechanical whale ship. This is different from a lot of the other things I've shown on this channel. It's not based off of a reference image at all. The two images on the left you can see are from Nick, my boyfriend. He created this sketch. I think that illustration was done in Paint, he said, or some other, a more rudimentary illustration program. He uses this whale as some of his profile images, I think mainly on Steam for video games. And I saw it and I just was so surprised, and I thought it was a really awesome idea. So I asked him if I could re-illustrate it just for fun, and he said yeah. So you can see on the right image that there are some things that I didn't completely translate, mainly the gears in the back of the whale. By the time I was mostly done with my illustration, I was a little tired and the gears seemed really complicated. Another thing that I didn't fully illustrate was the steam coming out of the pipes in the back, or any bubbles or anything coming out of the turbines on the fin. But overall, I'm still really happy with how it turned out, the light coming from the eye and using a image in the background for the water. When first starting out, one of the main things I did want to change when I was going to be illustrating this was the colors. Originally, the watercolor looked almost like a river to me. I think I associate more turquoise or greenish watercolors with tropical environments. I don't think a whale would be found in a river, so I opted for a more navy color. It still ends up looking turquoise tinted, but not nearly as green as the original illustration that I'm referencing. Of course, once changing the color of the water, I needed to change the color of the whale as well. It almost looked bronze. It obviously looked metallic, so I just went with a goldish looking color. I think bronze is more of a brown, maybe brass is more accurate, but either way, the water and the metal color both needed to change. One of the reasons seeing the initial whale illustration was so cool to me was when I was also in middle school or high school. In one of my art classes, I created a similar drawing in the sense that it was a praying mantis, but it was a mechanical praying mantis, and there was actually a little fighter person riding the back of it. And I remember at the time, that was one of the most detailed drawings I think I had done, as far as just adding little gears or exposed wires and circuit boards. And I was very proud of it at the time. And seeing this whale just really brought me back to that. So I had a lot of fun adding all the little mechanical accents for this whale as well. I wasn't exactly sure what the front parts on the lower jaw were supposed to be, so I just envisioned them as vents to ventilate water or filter through water. One of the most difficult things to add to this whale was the paneling. I could have used actual individual shapes, but instead what I opted for was just drawing lines to make it look like there were individual shapes. And I put all of those inside of a mask that was the same shape as the body. When drawing the panels, I think mine were a little too neat and organized in rows, almost like a brick pattern. I think if I were to spend more time on it, I probably would have redone those lines. The original paneling lines on the illustration I was referencing were actually done really well. They looked a lot more like patchwork. If I had spent more than a day on this, I might have taken a little more time to execute that part. Before I ever do shading on illustrations, I always try and make sure I have my base elements down first, all of my areas blocked out, any details put in, I want them present before I do any intense shading. And to be honest, this whale seemed not very satisfactory for the majority of this process to me. But as soon as I started adding the shading on the body of the whale and the mouth, it really all came together. And that's something that always happens with art to me, whether it's an Adobe Illustrator project or a more traditional art project, is you have an idea or a vision that you're trying to execute, and in the process you're trying to take steps to reach it, but you're not always sure how close you're going to get to your vision. And sometimes it turns out completely different, which, you know, that can be okay too. I think it's really common for creators in the middle of creating something to not be sure if what they're doing is, I don't want to say correct, but is what they want. But they just kind of have to stick it out until it's actually complete, because you can't judge. It's kind of like cooking, I guess. You can't judge a meal when you're halfway done making the meal. You're not going to be tasting something in the middle of making it. It's more towards the end. I mean, you can have better judgment then and make tweaks here and there, but with art, that's something that it can be really discouraging. I mean, this was a smaller illustration, so it wasn't a big deal, but I think I definitely feel that on larger projects when, you know, you're not sure if things turn out. And that's something that's really important that this channel helps me to do, is it helps me see projects to the end of a lifespan. Before, I think I would have a lot of sketches just kind of floating around that never would get finished. A downside to that is when you're creating art, you always get a lot of practice in the beginning part of a project, maybe the sketching, the idea, the concept, colors, but you don't fulfill and exercise the skills you need near the end of a project's life cycle. So tweaking, or maybe gradients, or color adjustment, highlight adjustment, composition, backgrounds, those are things that I've been getting a lot more practice with now that even with small illustrations like this, I'm really trying to make it look more like a finished project, or at least a complete thought. Something I was really happy that turned out well with this was the water in the background. I just pulled a picture of the ocean off Google and overlaid a bunch of gradients to tweak the colors and the opacity. Of course, I didn't want it to be a complete solid picture, but in the end, I was a lot more satisfied with that than I think I would have been just a plain background, or me trying to illustrate how underwater looks, because I feel like that would be really difficult and not something that I want to study at the moment. That's all I have for this illustration. It was a really fun exercise, and now that I've gotten a break from my main project commission, I'm actually going to go back to it and finally complete it. So look for a video on part 3 of the portrait commission coming out soon. Thanks for watching.